Hello and hello. Thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing? So why did so many Germans immigrate to the US? That is a great question. And I've actually noticed a lot lately, especially ever since reacting to all these different videos. You know, there's quite a lot of German influence over here in America. There's a lot of towns with German names. There's German food. There's even entire towns that like are German. There's the Pennsylvania Germans, and then in Texas, there's Texas German. There's quite a lot of German influence. So what's the dealio? Why did so many Germans immigrate to the US? Good question. By Knowledgia. Check them out, link down below. I am very excited for this.
According to the United States Census Bureau,
Whoa.
the largest ethnic group in the United States of America is German.
The largest ethnic group. Wow.
In 2019, a whopping 43 million Americans described themselves as being of full or partial German ancestry, with Pennsylvania alone accounting for 3.5 million.
Holy shit.
So, there is no doubt that at some point in time, there were a lot of German immigrants crossing the Atlantic to reach America. But what exactly was the reason? What made so many Germans decide to leave all they'd ever known and owned behind to start a new life in the United States of America? The first notable wave of German settlers in the American colonies came near the end of the 17th century when William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, invited religious outcasts from Germany to come and settle in his colony. Many, facing religious persecution back home, eagerly accepted the invitation. For the following decades, German immigration to the colony would steadily increase. For the most part, these settlers were emigrating from the more southwestern regions of Germany.
That's just so fascinating to me. I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to envision being those people. What, this dude all the way from a different country sends a message somehow and is like, hey, y'all come over here. Just pack up, leave your life behind, come over here to escape persecution. And millions did it.
Such as Baden-Württemberg,
It's just hard to put myself in those shoes.
Palatinate, and the Rhineland. But they would not be the only Germans to make their way to Pennsylvania. By midway through the 1700s, these settlers had founded multiple cities, such as Germantown, Skippack, and Conestoga. Upwards of 65,000 Germans had only recently made their way to the welcoming colony by the 1770s. But unfortunately, the influx of German immigrants would drastically decrease as the colonies inched closer and closer to the Revolutionary War. Numerous of the tens of thousands of settlers had left Germany not just for religious freedom, but also to flee from the effects of the 30 Years' War and subsequent conflicts that plagued Germany. Seeing such a large-scale war then break out in the New World, the dream of a new, safe, and promising home was shattered for many.
Oh, wow.
For those who had already arrived in the colonies, though, life was not horrible. Though challenging, it seems that success in the New World was a true possibility for the hard-working immigrants. According to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, the typical German immigrant was a poor farmer or artisan who arrived around 1750 with a wife and 2 children.
Is this famous painting really of German immigrants? I had no idea.
They were most likely in debt for the passage across the Atlantic, but had family or friends already settled in America. They were affiliated with the Lutheran or Reformed Church, but only loosely committed to an organized religion. Records indicate that they became prosperous members of the community. However, Many were too poor to pay the transatlantic passage, so as many as 1/2 to 2/3 of German immigrants came to Pennsylvania as indentured servants or redemptioners, as Germans called them. These redemptioners were essentially contracted servants for generally between 2 to 7 years, who would be forced to work for a particular employer to make up for the debts they owed and had incurred from their trip to America.
Whew! Wow. That's pretty heavy. Damn. I mean, I guess 2 years, if you feel like your life is in shambles and it's like, okay, 2 years of hard work and I'm out of here and I'm going to try and make a new life. 7 years, man, that starts to get to where it's like, oh my God, that's a long time.
And by the time the German influx had slowed, there were already, according to some historians, nearly 75,000 Germans living in Pennsylvania, and many others had immigrated to the rest of the colonies or would come later on. There had been an almost constant trickle of Germans entering the New World ever since the founding of Jamestown. And even some of the German Hessian soldiers that had been employed by the British during the American Revolution had decided to stay in the United States at the end of the war. During the early 1800s, more
That's pretty fascinating.
Germans had begun to make their way to America, though not in as large of waves due to famine back home. Others would come a few decades later due to the political strife in Germany, and during the 1850s, roughly 1 million Germans arrived in the United States, making the total number of German-born Americans by the 1860s around 1.3 million. In the 1870s, over 100,000 Germans from Russia found their way to America after the Tsarist government stripped away privileges that had been granted to German farmers in Russia hundreds of years prior. The next decade would outshine all the rest, though, as around 1.5 million Germans came to the US just in the 1880s alone.
Oh my God. Just when you thought it was over. 1 million more Germans.
This would be the peak, though, as the number of German-born Americans dropped from 2.9 million to 2.3 million between 1890 and 1910. Immigration had gone down drastically, and in 1920, the number had fallen even further, now sitting at 1.7 million. And even with the side of...
So what does that mean? That just means that they're slowly like dying off and not being replaced by new German-born people coming here. But they're still, presumably having kids. So their heritage, is being passed on down here in America.
Effects of displacement caused
It's just first-generation Germans.
by World War II, Americans born in Germany still only added up to 1.2 million after the start of the conflict. Germans would continue to immigrate over the following decades, as they still do today, but the number of them coming to America has nevertheless dropped remarkably.
Well, yeah, I mean, those reasons he talked about earlier, just the total instability over in that region, and the war and famine. People just, I feel like we all kind of take it for granted. Those types of situations just aren't, it's just not the way the world is in the Western world, at least anymore, in highly developed Western countries. Like, there's just not, it's not a dire situation to get over to any country from, Germany or America or France or the UK or anything. It's just like people still do it, and there still are reasons to go to whatever country, but it's not like a dire situation usually. So that makes sense.
1990, only 58 million Americans claimed to be German or partially German, even though others could be linked to German ancestors.
A lot of Americans don't even know their ancestry. So who knows what the actual number is?
Or partially German, even though others could be linked to German ancestors. But still, Even if the number of Germans coming into America had already reached its high point, they have undoubtedly had a huge impact on the country. And it does seem that German remains the most dominant ethnic group in the country. The reasons for their migration are multiple. One reason that is often overlooked, though didn't account for the first wave of immigrants, was the stories told by Germans who had already made their new lives in America with great success. From Gottfried Duden's book to simple letter correspondence between German immigrants and those they knew back home, people in Germany began to hear about the opportunities and freedoms that the colonies and later United States had to offer. Simple
Wow.
word of mouth is often all it
That's so funny to hear about, you know. I don't know. It's just so funny. Over here in America, you hear about how at least America used to be like a beacon on the hill of freedom. And there used to be truth to it. Now it's not I don't know. It's just interesting. It's not even just so much that America has fallen, it's that all these other European countries have risen so greatly.
takes. But still, there were many other factors that led to Germans crossing the ocean. For many, the feudal system back home left them yearning for more independence, as did other restrictions that had been placed on some, such as limits on marriages due to a fear of overpopulation and a worsening economy. But the economy was already bad enough for numerous people. High taxes were a constant burden, and making a respectable living just seemed more likely in the New World, with news of land being given to new settlers and industrialization later opening the door for more jobs outside of the typical farming. Further,
I think someone just needs to go and discover another new continent where, you know, that's the solution to the world we live in right now. I think we need a restart. We need to go discover a new continent, guys. Someone go out there. Christopher Columbus. You know, go sail around and see if you can find one. And we can all move there and start anew.
more, some communities in the German
Because there seems to be something to that. You know what I mean? There's something to starting fresh and taking all the good ideas that have worked throughout societies and tossing out all the bad ones and having a fresh start.
states were eager to get rid of the lower class anyway, and would even offer to cover the costs of the journey to America if the immigrants promised to never return.
Obviously, I'm joking. I don't know if I just realized, like, sometimes people take what I say a little too literally. I know that you're not going to discover another country unless it's like Atlantis under the ocean or something.
Return home. Other German men left illegally due to military service requirements, while more fled famine and frequent wars. And of course, as demonstrated by many of the original immigrants to the New World, religious freedom was often an important motivator. At the time, many were essentially told what to believe in. Catholicism or Protestantism, for example, by each monarch. For those with strong alternative beliefs who were unwilling to comply, fleeing the country became a way for them to practice their faith in peace. Not only did the American colonies have
A lot of brave people.
freedom of religion, but as stated earlier, the founder of Pennsylvania himself had even invited these religious outcasts to settle in his colony. Of course, many reasons exist as to why people of any country immigrate to another, and this is far from an exhaustive list, though it is some of the main explanations that have been discovered. Without German immigrants, for example, Americans may not
The
share
Christmas
the
tree.
tradition of decorated Christmas trees, and the Brooklyn Bridge wouldn't have been built without a German immigrant engineer, business owners, military generals.
I'm sure you can say that about a lot of things without German immigrants because, like he said, apparently they're the biggest ethnic minority in America. That's pretty amazing.
Scientists, There are dozens upon dozens of names of German immigrants who took the journey across the Atlantic and changed the future of.
And those people that are the types of people that do that are generally going to be, you know, very brave, very hardworking, pretty smart people that take that kind of trip. So that really does something special to a society, I think,
The colonies and the
to be made up of those people.
United States. Today, Germans still immigrate to the U.S. on occasion, but
On occasion.
more significantly is the lasting
And then they turn around and go back.
effects of those who had already come. 6 states are believed to have over 30% of their total populations be made up by full or partial German Americans. Another 7 have an at least 20% ethnic German population, and of all 50 states, not a single one has a German population that makes up less than 4.5% of the state's entire population. Possibly one of the most impressive parts about this is that most immigrants from the German states have assimilated almost, if not entirely, into German American culture and identity, meaning
Absolutely. That is absolutely true. Like, apart from, like, you know, what I was talking about, I guess in Texas, there's like Texas Germans and then like Pennsylvania Dutch. And, you know, those people don't cause any problems at all. I'm not saying anything bad about them. But you wouldn't even, like, you know, they're so assimilated into American culture. They are American culture.
that there really hasn't been an intentional preservation of German
Right.
identity in America, though some German heritage societies and communities exist. For the most
Yeah.
part, it's all thanks to the millions of people who braved the waters to start a new life in the United States that have made so much of America's roots German.
That was a really cool video. I don't know why that got me kind of hyped up. Let's go. USA, Germany, USA, Germany. All right. You guys are welcome over here anytime. Anybody else want to immigrate over here? We need some more intelligent people over here in America. Come on over. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow.